witchcraft religion, and looking at the symbolism across cultures, the values of these symbols, what they do in terms of bringing people to action, and so on and so forth. The other area of expertise is anthropology. My interest in paleoanthropology, the behavior of our ancient ancestors, and paleopathology, understanding how people ate, how that affected their bones, disease, illness, and so on. So that's how I spent my at the college. I'm also very interested in herbs. I was in private practice as a clinical anthropologist for about 30 years. And I think probably the closest you would understand what a clinical anthropologist does as a naturopathic physician. Although it goes way beyond that. Anyway, I have a very large herb garden, and I bring students and staff over to look at these magical herbs. Nothing illegal, but I show them the different types of plants available to the early Christian cults, going back 2,000 years, even back further than that.
John, can you speak a little bit more slowly?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Also, we have a feral ant community, which we have managed now about 20 years, and I will be writing a book on that at some point. Still collecting data on that.
Go ahead, you're fine.
Okay. Not sure what to say about myself. The research for these two books, the Failed God and the Mushroom Christian Arts, began many, many years ago. As a graduate student, I read Allegra's book, The Mushroom Frogs, and I didn't know what really to think of it. I didn't have enough information to make so. In Allegra's book, the first that he had one picture from a cathedral in southern Italy, and in that, it's in France, and in that image he showed a mushroom tree. And again, I didn't think to think of that. And of course, the Catholic Church easily disposed of the tree and kind of pushed Allegro aside. I don't think people really appreciate what Allegro did, and that is he really exposed Jesus through the Dead Sea Scrolls. And by doing so, the Catholic Church and other authorities crucified him. He wasn't able to finish his doctorate and so on, which is a red flag. It tells great people about how threatening his book was. In 2001, my wife and I went to Europe, and while in Rome and in Venice and Vienna, we began to see the mushrooms in the garden. Didn't really know what I had until we got back to California. I was able to examine the art in great detail. And,
John, sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak a little bit more slowly? We're losing a lot of what you're saying.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. In 2001, my wife and I went to Europe, and our purpose was not to discover mushrooms in the that wasn't our purpose, but we can. For anyone who goes to Venice, you go into St. Mark's Basilica, you'll find that there are mushrooms all over the place. As a matter of fact, the cover of Failed God has a picture of Jesus with a mushroom in his hand, and he's pointing to himself. So that image actually tells you who Jesus was. My research has revealed that the art and the artists really kept the original Christianity alive. We start off looking at the different cults that were available in Palestine 2,000 years ago. And these different had very limited following. There may have been 40 or 50 people in a cult. These cults have different ideas as to how a person should behave, should be, but the original cults tended to emphasize knowledge, seeking knowledge of thyself, being a decent person. And not everyone was allowed into these cults. Now, as you all probably know, in the gospel, Jesus would offer a parable. And if a person could answer the parable, he was a candidate for communion with Jesus. And that communion would take place through the consumption of the Eucharist, which was really the act of the mushroom. As time went on, these different cults developed somewhat of a political structure where you had bishops or people who ran these cults, and they didn't become political. When the leader died, these cults they would fall apart. There's so much to say on this area. These cults began to fight one another. And
we just lost sound completely. Can you repeat that sentence again?
These cults were fighting with one another. And this is where the persecution comes in. Those cults that, for the most part, underground, weren't persecuted. It was those cults that became visible, probably by using these substances. They became a nuisance, as I described in the book. And then the Roman government began to seek out these cults because they were a challenge to the polity. And they would crucify people. Now, in order to stop the persecution, Constantine saw an opportunity to put out the fires at home, so to speak, and to invite some of these cults into the polity. Those that trained Constantine received tax. The problem is, once they became connected to politics, they had to find Jesus. Are you following?
Yeah, but we're losing the sound a little bit. Can you repeat that sentence again?
Once some of these Christian cults were connected to the politic through Constantine, they had to find Jesus. And they couldn't. And so we have a very important priest by the name of Eusebius of Caesarea, who probably under the threat of violence by Constantine went out to find Jesus, and he couldn't. And so he forged Jesus into existence. And we know that this happened. There is a very short paragraph in Josephus's Jewish Wars that shows up in an edition of the book, but it is not in previous editions, and so on. Eusebius and his gang went to different cults, confiscated books. Some people claim they burned a lot of these books. I'm not sure that they did. I think a lot of this material is in the Vatican Library. But at any rate, once they forged Jesus into history, they had to develop a storyline. All the books in the New Testament are constructions from bits and pieces that were available probably for about 200 or 300 years, and they were spanned. We have no idea who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. There's no way of really knowing. These, again, were not complete works. These were added to from approximately 312 of current era up until probably the 6th century. The church credits Saint Jerome with putting the Vulgate Bible together. However, he had helped if he was the real person. But I'm not sure that half of these people that are talked about in the Catholic Church were really real people. St. Paul was a non-person, as was St. Peter. These are not real people. These are constructions to build a storyline. There is about 1,000 years of church history that runs from, let's say, the late 3rd century right up until 1200, the current era, that can't be verified. The reason it can't be verified is because it was written by the Catholic priests. And it's like presidents in the United States, when their libraries together, they put in libraries the best they put in the libraries they want people to believe, and they throw out the rest. So we have the same thing with the Catholic Church. Now, let's go back to that original message attributed to Jesus. His original message was seek knowledge, seek yourself, know thyself, be a responsible person, and be a decent person. When the Catholic Church got finished with it, they perverted the message. And if you look at the history of the Catholic Church, you can see it as a fascist organization. Not sure where else I should go with this. Let's talk about the mushrooms. When you look at Christian art, you cannot read it as history. The Catholic Church would like you to do so, but you cannot. The icons, the images, speak to another place. So you have to read these, interpret these images in a very different way. These images in themselves speak to knowledge, speak to human beings, but not if you read them as history. The mushroom in the art represents God. The mushroom is the signature of God, and it is what inspired the artists. Now, the mushroom itself shows up in the art as a mushroom, but at certain time periods, the mushroom is disguised in various ways. And these are what I call mushroom motifs. They can be seen in the clothing. They can be seen as loaves of bread. They can be seen as the book, the gospel held in the hand of a saint. By the way, gospel means God stole. And that's what you get when you consume mushroom. You also see breast mushrooms. You see shoot mushrooms, and so on. Again, they're disguised, but if you know what to look for, they're there. These motifs do not show up in the secular of the same time period. They're only part of the religious art. All of the art was commissioned. The art was controlled by the Catholic Church, and they had specific images that were included depending on what the theme might be. And actually, the themes are quite limited. They include the announcing that Mary would have a child They include, for example, the crucifixion of Jesus and so on. But all of this art was commissioned, and everything in the art was there on purpose. These mushrooms did not appear out of the artistic whimsy of the particular artist. Again, they do not show up in the secular art of the same time period. Now, we can recognize the mushroom in the art beginning at least from the late 3rd century all the way up to the beginning of the 20th century. It's there in all time periods in its various forms. I have a cat here. Perhaps we could take some questions on.
Absolutely. Let me start off, and we'll see if you can hear us okay. Last week I talked a little bit about the Essenes and the possibility of a person like John the Baptist. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of who were the Essenes and what this person, if there was a person named John, what he was doing, and what the baptism is, and how that possibly relates to the Jesus myth?
Okay. The Essenes, the name Essene is a little bit ambiguous. This, we're not exactly sure how they refer to themselves. At any rate, they seem to be a group that broke away from the Maccabees. Maccabee is a Hebrew word for, well, it means hammer. This was a very violent group, very much into warfare, confronting the Romans, and so on. The Essenes seem to have been away from this group, and when they did, they took a great deal of the literature that was in Jerusalem at the time. They apparently changed a lot of literature. They were a very strict group, a very apocalyptic group. For them, the world was coming to an end, and their belief was that they had to strictly adhere to the laws, or they wouldn't get to that place. Now, keep in mind that in the Old Testament, there is very little mythic material on heaven and hell. This comes later, and perhaps it comes from the Essenes, not sure. The Maccabees seem to have had the original idea that if you don't get it here, you're not going to get it anyway. The Essenes had an idea, and again, they broke away. They appear to have dropped out of society and maintained very strict adherence, depending on who you want to read. They disavowed sex at least for 3 years. They got married and so on. At any rate, when you have a strict group like that, the probability is that people will break away. And that may be who John the Baptist was. But he may not have been a real person. He may have been a generalization. Because the message that's from our hero Jesus, that is, seek knowledge, know thyself, responsibility for one's actions, and human decency, this has not been part of the Essene agenda. So we have to see John the Baptist as a positive. We have these different cults. You have Egyptian priests who had broken away from the Egyptian tradition. You have Christ cults, Jesus cults, Gnostics, Manichaeans, and who knows what else up there. And as time went on, it seems to have been a kind of a standard idea in these cults. One should seek knowledge. One should be a decent person. And this was a real threat to the Roman authority, which you can understand. They weren't interested in human decency whatsoever. All you have to do is look around the world today and see many rulers who are interested in human decency. At any rate, the Essenes, if nothing else, the Catholic Church paid a great deal of attention to their literature. If you read the Gnostic Gospels, you don't get any history of Jesus. It is more of a learning experience. And if you want to get a better idea as to what the Gnostics were up to, read Pistis Sophia. Although that book was put together probably in the 6th century of the current era, whoever put it together understood the knowledge and the teachings that were going on amongst the octave. Now, John the Baptist is a wonderful generalization because he refers to people coming out of the wilderness, coming out of the forest, and revealing to the world what is necessary to have community of people living decent lives. His idea of baptism was to introduce the individual to the teachings. And the teachings, if we refer to the Dead Scroll, came from the teacher of righteousness. And the teacher of righteousness, as understood by John Allegro, was the antidote Muscaria mushroom.
Sorry, John, did you say the Dead Sea Scrolls kind